think it calls for. I'm kind of surprised, I guess, by the lack of.
In some ways, this, the Pussy Riot action and activities have been characterised by the state as being Western-backed and Western-inspired and Western-funded, which they're not. And in some ways, all this support, although it's great for their morale, doesn't have that great effect on the state. I mean, if Madonna comes out and supports Pussy Riot, that's almost a reason for them to up the pressure in a way. So in some respects, although it's welcome, sometimes this pressure doesn't achieve the desired effect.
And it's also, you have to look at it in the fact that, for example, the majority of Russians do support them being punished, and they think that they got what they deserve. So, I think
because they did it in a church.
Well, there are a few reasons. Yeah, because it was in a church. Because I think that for a lot of even non-religious Russians, they see, because religious people were oppressed for so long in the Soviet Union, they have this kind of moral high ground. And I think that for a lot of people that are sort of on the fence, and they might even be against Putin, but they thought, like, why are you messing with these people? Why are you provoking? Go do it somewhere else. And so I think that for us, there was this split between how the case was seen in the West and in Russia. And it was, in the West, it was like, okay, this punk band performs against Putin, and they're put in jail for that, which is kind of nonsense. In Russia, it was like with these anti-religious, feminist Bulgarians, just Stevens do this horrible thing. And in reality, we want to show that that the story is much more complicated, but they're also patriots, they're idealists, who want to transform the country for the better. Hopefully that will show that to Russian audiences.
But they did actually apologize for offending people. Now, and what you capture in the documentary, and by the way, let me mention again, Pussy Riot, A Punk Prayer, you can see it starting on HBO tomorrow night at 9, but HBO being HBO, you'll have more opportunities to see it, and you should try to catch it because it really is an insight. And of course, I just forgot where I was going with this thing, where I was heading.
I think you were talking about them being apologetic.
Oh yeah, they're being apologetic, but coming from an activist background myself, when I was a teenager, sometimes you preach to the choir instead of really explaining. This is what I think they failed to do. Really explain to the court and really to the Russian people why they did such an outrageous protest, why they chose that. In other words, not just, they were like talking to each other rather than really explaining why they decided to do something like that. And that's what I felt was lacking in their defense. And maybe that was their lawyer, I don't know, but they wrote their own statements, and I just wish they would have said more. That this is where it came from in our hearts, and this is why we offended, and we're sorry we offended, but this is what we were trying to do. And I never really heard that.
I mean, I think they did try hard to explain that, and clearly they did misjudge how this was received. And getting back to what Max was talking about before, this day of protest, 100,000 people turn up to protest against what's happened in this cathedral. None of those people heard what this was about and knew the content of
right.
it. And it was immediately characterised as an attack on and an insult to religion. And I don't think people ever got beyond that, because Kirill, the
patriarch... Well, that's a very emotional thing. Yeah. Of course they're not going to...
They were told that they had been offended and therefore they were offended,
And of course you're talking about people who were repressed, in their religion. They weren't allowed to practice their religion.
Yeah, it's a sensitive subject.
Right.
And I think that, you touched upon something very